Well, good morning, everyone. Wanted to welcome you to our first press conference since coming back from recess. And there's a lot to talk about, not only about a couple of the issues that were addressed via the press release, but also some late-breaking news and some things that are happening locally that I think are very important. But I will touch on the first two ones. Both are minimum wage law implementation. I've been in contact and conversation with leaders from Prince George's County just to talk about some of the nuances and differences in terms of date implementation of the law. Obviously, with us moving forward with the October 1st date, we're not looking to make any immediate changes to that. But when it comes to some of the other subsequent dates, we do want to try and marry those up. So that we don't have multiple changes within a year between both the state mandates as well as the local mandates. And so that's something that's not changing the context of the law itself nor the concept. It really is just designed to make sure that when it comes to impacts on businesses, we try and keep it consistent between what the state has asked for and also what we're looking at for the county. I did want to talk about our local election and campaign finance because I think that that's a very hot button issue. I'll be meeting with Councilmember Andrews immediately following this press conference to talk about some of the details regarding public campaign finance. Many have questioned whether or not support from the council is waning. I wouldn't characterize it that way, and I've talked to a number of council members who have still initiated that they are supportive of the idea. There are a number of concerns out there, one of which is the total amount of taxpayer dollars that are spent on the public campaign finance. Also, the total amount as far as each individual campaign can donate or can raise, or spend on an election, as well as the matching funds and the percentages of those matching funds, whether it's 4-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, whatever the case may be. So those were some of the details, but the whole entire concept, I think, the entire council is still supportive of when it comes to understanding about public campaign finance and the challenges that we face in the wake of both McCutcheon versus FEC and Citizens United. They really have made it difficult for us here as a locality and quite frankly, across this country, to enable that we have elections that give every person an opportunity regardless of the amount of money that they raise. With that being said, I do want to move on to a couple other items. Many of you are aware of what has happened in Germantown and the search for the two missing children. I would just send out an appeal to all of those that are watching and would hope that all media outlets have been doing what they have continued to do, which is continue to put these children's faces out there. This is a very difficult situation. I know that I've been in constant contact with Commander Gillespie, who's commander of the 5th District, since this unfolded and have been regularly updated as to the status. Was aware when she was taken into custody. And at that point, subsequent results of questioning. I can tell you without divulging any details in the case that it is imperative for us, and time is of the essence in terms of trying to make sure that we do locate these children. And so anybody with any information regarding their whereabouts, we would ask that you please notify the police as soon as possible. I did lastly want to talk about something that the Education Committee just took up. I am planning from an education perspective to handle a lot more of our budget items earlier in the year. I do want to make sure that we kind of lay the groundwork as to what we are expecting next year. Obviously, we are not flush with cash here in Montgomery County. However, it will be important for us to lay out a plan as to how we are going to try and achieve some of the results and really impact both our achievement and opportunity gap here in Montgomery County. With that being said, we had a meeting with both MCPS, with Montgomery College and the universities at Shady Grove to talk about the ACES program. Both Councilmember Branson, Councilmember Andrews, and myself were unanimous in terms of our support of ACEs and the great expansion that we added to the program. We heard testimony from not only stakeholders that are part of ACEs, but also a student that came through the ACEs program. Many of you who've reported on this issue before know that there was a young lady that I had actually interacted with when I was picking up my dry cleaning, who I noticed had an ACEs bracelet on, and asked her about the program. This was prior to our budget deliberations earlier this year. And the review that she gave me alone, which was an unfettered, unscripted review of how this program changed her life. And I found out this morning from the very coach of that young woman that she is now in school in university in Virginia. And that's a tremendous story for us, seeing the success of this program and what it can do from some of our at-risk students. And so we are looking forward to seeing an expansion of the ACEs program. We've asked for a report from both MCPS as well as Montgomery College and universities at Shady Grove about multi-year extension so that we can expand ACEs to all 24 high schools. And that's a very big deal. The current cost of the program, before you, folks start to ask, it's implemented at 9 high schools right now, and the current cost is $1.9 million. Doing rough math, you probably look at somewhere between doubling and tripling the cost. But from my perspective, one of the things that I'd like to do is reduce my constituency. And by reduce my constituency, many of you know that I represent Clarksburg Jail. And a lot of these kids that don't have opportunities are going to end up there. A lot of these kids that don't have people believing in them are going to end up being residents of Clarksburg Jail. I want to try and make sure that we can reduce that population and get these kids just where that young lady went, into a school, so that they can become productive and successful members of our society. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
We have a Montgomery Village meeting next week. What can you
I
tell
do.
us about that?
The Montgomery Village meeting is actually exciting because there's a lot going on with the potential for the golf course there and Monument that's looking to build. They've been in constant communications with the residents there, so I'm sure that will be a hot topic of discussion. So it'll be very interesting to see. I know that there's been a lot of conversations also about a number of playgrounds in the South Village. Again, something that I wouldn't be able to do directly. That falls under the jurisdiction of the Montgomery Village Foundation. However, I've been extremely supportive of, and the community has been supportive of. I know that foundation members will be there, and so hopefully working together, we can try and achieve some of those things to continue to build on what I think is already a great community in Montgomery Village. You know, I was fortunate enough to be there for their 4th of July parade earlier this year, and had great conversations with community members throughout to talk about what's important to them, and we'll just be following up on those. You know, the great thing is that you talk to a majority of members of Montgomery County, and they're always talking about how they have a great way of life. It's tweaking on the edges. You know, people are very happy about the brand new library that's open. That's where we're going to have our meeting. So that's great, but it's continuing to deliver, you know, whether it's fire station response times. That's something we've paid very close attention to and been working with Chief Laura on. But it's also crime. I mean, remember that 2 years ago, we had a spike in crime in Montgomery Village and had tremendous problems. It was the county executive and I at that community meeting that stood there in front of residents and said we were going to deliver and make sure that we made a difference. And now we've seen that. Crime has gone down dramatically. We've solved a lot of the problems. We actually have switched from PCAT team, which was one team that floated around all districts, to actually a DCAT team, a district community action team, to focus on hot spots. And so this is great. It really is tremendous for us to show that, you know, we've been successful at being able to really stamp out and reduce the crime in not only Montgomery Village, but in the 5D and 6D areas.
Greg, on the campaign finance stuff, you mentioned McCutcheon and Citizens United, but what really has gotten a lot of these finance systems in trouble legally in other places is a trigger mechanism that would give publicly funded candidates extra money to go in service to that spend. That was what was thrown out as unconstitutional. That is not part of the system, so I'm trying to figure out why you think McCutcheon and Citizen United are going to this proposal.
Well, one of the things that I've asked for to be considered is to actually set a limit on the total amount of spending that you can do if you participate in public campaign finance. So, for example, and I'm just picking out random numbers, this is by no means what has either been vetted or floated, would be that in a certain situation, let's say you were running for a district council, you'd be limited at spending $150,000. And so, regardless of the matching funds, regardless of how much money you raise, if you're participating in this program, you can't spend more than that. Because what basically has happened with McCutcheon and Citizens is that you've opened up just the floodgates of money to come in without any kind of restrictions. And so what it really does is and I know there are restrictions, but what it really does is it allows us to get to a point where it really is about the candidate and not about the money. And that's really the direction that we're trying to go in, to give everybody a chance to and get their message out, have their voice heard. But then after that, it basically goes down to what's going to be most important for that constituent when they're trying to decide on, whether or not this is the person or that's the person that's going to represent me.
So you would have a system where there are spending limits on publicly funded candidates, not on
Well, unfortunately, at this point, that's exactly right. And unfortunately, what we can't do right now, obviously, we can't do that based on the law that we have currently that's in place federally. I would hope that while I've had conversations with some federal congressional members that do support an idea like this, it's not something that has any kind of traction right now. But if people are voluntarily participating in this program, let's do it right. Let's show people and set the example of how it's done correctly in terms of saying that if people are really concerned, and let me just be very clear, I'm not concerned about whether or not the dollar is coming from a corporation or from a person. What I'm saying is that once you've gotten that money, that's the limit. And then it's just between those two people or three people or whatever the case may be to decide, who's the right person. It's those candidates, and each of them has had an opportunity to put their message out there, and then people get to decide what it is. It's not about one person being able to spend $1 million and get TV time and all kinds of other things, and the other person is struggling to pay for one flyer to send out in the mail. Those are the kinds of disparities that we currently see, and that, I think, is the true solution to public campaign finance.
One of the other concerns I believe I've heard you raise in the past with this legislation is it doesn't deal with outside organizations spending on behalf of a candidate. Do you foresee putting anything forward, maybe an amendment that would address that?
I've talked about that as well. Anybody who's participating in public campaign finance, there would be a limit in terms of what they could take. And I think that the current legislation, if I'm not mistaken, actually has a restriction that you're not allowed to take PAC. So you can't take PAC money anyway. But they can do independent expenditures on their own, and that's something that unfortunately we don't have the power to affect right now. That's something that, again, state and federal level, we'd have to take up. I mean, again, building a perfect system, you'd build one in which all of those things were incorporated. The reality is we have to operate within the framework of what we're currently allowed to do with the state law.
And you talk about setting an example. Would you take public financing if this passed?
It depends on how it was laid out. So I'd have to see what the actual program looked like. One of the things that I've always been concerned about, and I've always been able to raise a significant amount of money, is that the challenge is whether or not you want to take public taxpayer dollars if you know that you can already raise the money yourself, and leave that money for others. Since we're talking about a limit in terms of the total amount of money that's out there, that's a question that remains as well. And so there are a number of different decisions that you have to go through in making sure that it's going to be right and appropriate. I will say this, is that I do hope for and have continued to lobby on both Capitol Hill and at the Supreme Court for a day in which we have true campaign finance reform, which really does affect the total amount of spending that we have in many of our races. And I think that's the most important thing that we can continue to push for. And in the meantime, if we have programs like this that get us close, I'm supportive of those as well.
Anything else on your fall agenda?
Well, the fall agenda is going to be combined with working with Council Vice President Leventhal, who appears at this point to have support necessary to ascend to the council presidency. Everything changes, you know, it could change tomorrow, but that's the way I read the tea leaves now. And so he and I are working in conjunction together to create a very seamless transition into next year. Some of the things that we continue to focus on, obviously, large lion's share part of our budget is education. And so we're going to be extremely focused on that. I know that Councilmember Leventhal, being the chair of Health and Human Services, but also a passionate advocate, is very concerned about continuing to really do all we can to stamp out homelessness. You know, we've done a great job. And, you know, folks that are following, and I appreciate all the great stories that each of you have written about our 100,000 Homes campaign and the successes that we've garnered from that. So we certainly want to revisit that and double down on our efforts. We don't just talk the talk, but we walk the walk. We do want to make sure that we do end homelessness here in Montgomery County. I do think that it is achievable. It really does require a lot of work on our part and a lot of support, but it can be done. And so I'm very excited about the great successes that we've had to this point and looking forward to more. Many of you know that I'm very passionate about our school bus cameras, so you'll be seeing some legislation that potentially will be coming from the state to allow us to change our numbers. I was talking with both Senator Nancy King and Senator Brian Feldman, Delegate Charlie Barkley, and Kirill Resnick, and a number of others, starting to garner support. We do have a delegation meeting that will be coming up shortly where the council will be meeting with the delegation to talk about both leadership from both organizations will be talking about priorities for the upcoming General Assembly session. You know that I am the MACO representative, so Maryland Association of Counties representative for the council. And so now we're gearing up and getting ready for what state legislation we might be pushing for. A couple other things along those fronts. We have been talking about nightlife and the Nightlife Economy Task Force and the recommendations there, both when it comes to hours, but also talking about availability of or freeing up the availability of different venues of purchase for a lot of our restaurants and bars in the area. I'm not sure what that would look like if it actually came to fruition in terms of a bill, but those are conversations that continue to be had to really keep us competitive when it comes to the ever-changing nightlife economy market that we see in the district and in Northern Virginia. And then also when it comes to public school construction dollars, it really is important for us. I've had conversations with the Lieutenant Governor and Democratic gubernatorial candidate about his continued commitment for supporting additional funds for school construction. So there's a lot of promise that's out there. And so we keep our fingers crossed that whoever ascends to the governor's house in Annapolis is going to be supportive of making sure that we can continue on something that is a top priority for Montgomery County, which is school construction finance and making sure that we have those dollars necessary in addition to universal pre-K. Those are all things that are going to make a tremendous difference when it comes to affecting both the achievement and opportunity gaps here in Montgomery County.
I know on October 2nd, the MDOT's going to be here talking transportation priorities. What are the transportation priorities going on?
Well, you know, we continue with both the Purple Line and Quarter City Transitway. Those are the two top priorities that have been identified by the council. I myself have continued to talk about bus rapid transit between Clarksburg and Shady Grove. I think that that's a very important piece that needs to be had. If we are not to move forward with M83, then that definitely needs to be the alternative that would potentially help those residents there that have been kind of locked off from access to public transportation. So that being said, those are the things, but this council has been very clear with its transportation priorities letter, in addition to a number of different road projects, whether it's interchanges that need to just, that are underway but just need to be finished. But no major new road projects have been approved at this point, and so that's where our focus is, mainly on those two public transportation projects.
So the election coming up on November 4th, any talk about how you're going to get more people to vote?
Well, we've continued to outreach to folks. We continue to try and make sure that people understand just how important this is to have their voice heard. We are working with our Board of Elections, making sure that they are able to do everything that they need to do outreach. The county has undertaken outreach as well, both on a social media front. Many of you have been extremely helpful in making that happen. We do have additional need for bilingual election judges, and many of you have retweeted some of the tweets that we've put out. It's really important for folks to understand. I think that, again, what I commented on before is that the good thing about it is that I'm seeing more and more stories that are out there talking about the great things that are being done. And that, again, gives people belief in their government. But I think that there has to be more of that. And so I think that the more that we do as elected leaders in talking about, it's for myself, might not be always for a lot. It seems like you're patting yourself on the back when that's your job, to do good things and enact good things in your community. But I think that people also have to hear about them. People also have to understand that these are the things that we're doing each and every day, because then that's how they get that buy-in. That's how they get vested in terms of believing that they're not only that their vote makes a difference, but they have a place in terms of making a change. And so we need to tell those stories about young people, like the young woman who I met at the Cleaners, who ultimately was very instrumental in terms of us continuing and increasing the funding that we had for ACEs. Those are the stories that people need to hear so they understand it is about community. It is about people engaging in our public elected system, right? And being able to access us and talk to us about their priorities, that will get that buy-in and will really make people want to continue to vote in officials that they think are going to represent them well.
Craig, in your talks with MCPS, their basic message when you're at the achievement gap is essentially, well, everything we do is to address the achievement gap, and basically we got it covered. Here's why, but strategic plan 1, 2, and 3. What other things are you proposing that you would try to push them on specifically, programmatically, in that direction?
Well, I think today's conversation centered around, at the very end, I made the comment that I think many of us agree, look, when I was in school, guidance counselors played a tremendous role in terms of shaping and helping. One of the coaches for the ACES program said, I basically believe in kids, and because of my belief in them, it helps them to succeed. And I had commented that, well, that's what our guidance counselors and teachers used to do. The reality is that they're so focused on teaching to the test and making sure that you achieve a 95 that's sort of sucked up everything else. And that's a problem. And the reality is it's no fault of their own. That's where we've gone as a nation. That's not just here in Montgomery County. That's throughout. Because of the global competitiveness, we've lost sight. But the reality is if you believe in that child and you instill in them that they can succeed, they're going to get that 95 anyway. And so it's looking at it from a different framework. And I think that ultimately it's those kinds of changes. It's not going to come from us enacting some sort of legislation. I wish that were the case, that it was that easy, but it's not. It's really a systematic change that over the past 20, 30 years that we've gone to where we've gotten away from what's at the core. When we teach kids about believing in themselves and being able to be successful, That really is what our education duties are about. It's not about teaching a person that, hey, you need to score a 90 on this particular task. And so I think that as we work more towards that and really start working with our school system, who also believes that as well, we'll get there. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think that programs like ACES, to where you start infusing people back into these children's lives that do tell them and work with them on understanding priorities, understanding about bad decisions and what those decisions will mean for them when it comes to their futures. That's what this is all about.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Gutterman from the Sentinel. And talking about ACES, I watched a bit of the briefing this morning. And going forward, could you talk a little bit more about what the expansion would look like and what the challenges might be, either in terms of funding or implementation?
Sure. So I think from an implementation perspective, obviously you've got to have the right people that are in these positions. The coach that we heard from, Dr. Robinson, was extremely passionate and very well spoken and right on target in terms of where his priorities are. Finding people like that isn't easy. We struggle with that in our school system and in everything. I mean, to have a person that's passionate and committed like that. So I think that that's the implementation challenge in terms of finding the right folks. The monetary piece, I think, look, we as a council have always been committed to making sure that we are doing things that are going to move the needle, that are going to make a difference. And so I think from that perspective, we've got to do that. We've got to continue to put money where we know it's going to make a difference, where it's going to achieve the results, and we've seen them. We've seen those real-world examples from the young man that spoke to us to the young lady that I spoke to at that dry cleaners that day. I mean, they continue to exist, and so, by us supporting things that work and putting those as a part of our budget, I think we're going to continue to move the needle when it comes to both gaps.
25 people applied for the planning board opening. Are you going to give us a short list again?
Yes, we will go through the exact same process as we did before. That should be released shortly. And then that information, of course, all of those interviews will be televised just as we had done before. A very open process to make sure that everybody's engaged and can see who the folks are who potentially could be making some decisions regarding a very important aspect of our job, which is planning.
And you said soon. What's kind of
It may be up on the web in the next day or two. There you go.
the short list?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe even today.
And do you have the schedule for those interviews yet?
I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's rather quickly. It should be within the next couple weeks. We should be taking that up. So, all right. Well, folks, thank you very much. Look forward to more as we get a little bit more involved. I know there are a number of things that each of my individual council members are working on, and once I've had a chance to talk to them in greater detail, I'll bring those back to our next press conference. So thank you very much, guys.